take a shorter course. It can take a shorter course. Okay. So if it take a shorter course, so this portion of the river and this portion of the river, this becomes cut off. This becomes cut off. And from the neck of the meander, it has cut it. So we call it neck cut off. Neck cut. Or I may have this kind of situation where the cut is little late. Cut is late. Cut is late and it is not from the neck. Then we call it a shoot cutoff. Shoot cutoff. So this is neck cutoff and this is shoot cutoff. When it is cut from the meander neck, you call it a neck cutoff. When it is cut not from the neck but it little later, then you call it a shoot cutoff. What will be the now this portion which is now is not getting any supply and it may be left like a lake, what you call the oxbow lake. Oxbow lake. And so what will be the nature of product of the neck cutoff and shoot cutoff? This is neck cutoff, this is shoot cutoff. What is the difference between the two? You can see because it is neck cutoff, so the supply of sand has been stopped very early and the entire thing is now filled by mud. So the supply of sand is cut here. Whereas in case of shoot cutoff, because it is quite late, so the supply of sand it gone up to a certain level and then it is become stopped. So the whether the starvation in the channel is very early or the starvation in the channel is late, based on that we identify whether the channel is neck cutoff or it is a shoot cutoff. Is it okay or you need to clarify it more?
It's okay, sir.
So this is neck cutoff or shoot cutoff, and both neck cutoff and shoot cutoff, they are actually the channel deposit, so their base will be erosional, but the channel will be very quickly starved and filled by mud, or it will be starved little late and filled by mud. Okay. Now, a meandering deposit, depending on the intrabasinal tectonics. What is intrabasinal tectonics? Intrabasinal tectonics is that when you have a tectonics which is within a basin. Suppose today the Gangetic basin. It is starting from the Himalaya and going up to the Bay of Bengal. So the entire basin, you can identify the dimension of a fluvial basin. It is a huge basin. Now in this basin, anywhere, suppose near to the Kanpur, I have a earthquake, or near to the Patna, I have a earthquake, and there is a shift in the river valley. There is a change in the slope. What will happen to that? That the channel will start flowing in the higher sloping surface, it will leave its another. That is what we call the avulsion. That is what we call the avulsion. Now, I now come on to the another concept of fluvial sedimentology, which is actually the one major concept for last 30 to 40 years, and the credit goes to a person called Andrew Meyer. Andrew Meyer. What he said that suppose I have a how if I ask you that how to draw a braided river succession and a meandering river succession. Suppose if I draw a braided river succession, and a meandering river succession. So this is braided, this is meandering. What is the difference between the two? Here you are seeing the fining upward succession. Fining upward, there are a significant amount of mud which are floodplain product. Floodplain, there is very minimum or absence of floodplain product. The sand bodies, they are lenticular. Here it is sheet-like. Sheet-like. This is what you can make out when you are making a two-dimensional fluvial succession. Am I correct? Are you drawing the figure or not?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So what is the fundamental difference? Drawing, okay, but what is the fundamental difference that you try to understand? That in a braided river, there are sheet-like bodies. There is not much grain size variation within individual sheet. Sometimes you get a little, particularly in the Donjek type, you will get a little upward fining. But in the meandering, there is a clear-cut fining upward succession. There is a significant floodplain deposit. And this is the fun. This is when you make a what Mial said. Okay, this is giving you a two-dimensional perspective, but this really do not give you a three-dimensional perspective. How really the entire bar and channel system it behaved in space. You are only talking about time because you are making a vertical panel. So you are talking about what about space? How a river was there in space and how the bar and channel they were in mutual relation to one another. How I can understand that for a suppose I am working in a Permian section, in a Triassic section, in a Paleozoic section. I want to know how really the river was in space, how the channels were there, and that gave him to the concept of architectural element analysis. Architectural element analysis. What is that? What is that? An architectural element is a three-dimensional body, which is bounded by some bounding surface which is bounded by bounding surface, architectural element is a three-dimensional body which is bound by bounding surface and mutually constitute the framework of a river. Mutually constitute the framework of a river. What he said that there may be a fixed number of architectural elements. Suppose a bar, a channel, a mass flow, floodplain, and whatever be the river system around the world, there cannot be any other architectural element. So he categorized those architectural elements into a particular type. What are those types? Suppose there are 6 to 8 architectural elements that he categorized. That is the mass flow, channel, bar, floodplain, swamp, like that. Now, each architectural element is made up of a number of faces. Now, what is a facies? Suppose a trough cross-stratified sandstone, amalgamated trough. It can be a ripple cross-laminated sandstone. It can be a silt and mud alternating unit. So all these different units, they are the different faces. And how these faces, they are together making a three-dimensional unit. So when I am talking about a bar, suppose bar is an architectural element. Now, a bar may be constituted of a mass flow unit, then cross-stratified unit, then ripple laminated unit, and finally it can be formed by the silt and clay. All these things, they together, they form. Suppose I am talking about a point bar. What is the constitution of a point bar? It starts with a thalloic deposit, then large-scale trough cross-stratified, then small-scale cross-stratified, then the silt and clay. So what are those? Suppose the thalloic deposit, that is a particular facies formed by a particular process. Large-scale cross-stratified, trough cross-stratified, that is formed by a particular process, the particular scale of bed form. They are forming it, and that requires a particular level of the flow energy. Then you silt and clay, that is a particular kind of environmental condition and the flow energy. So they are representative of different depositional conditions, which are the different phases. But all them together, they are forming a point bar. So a bar is an architectural element. Because in a river system, the point bar, it constitutes a three-dimensional unit and it is related to the channel. Now coming on to the channel. How a channel is, there are a large number of trough bed forms, which is the channel bed form, the bars, the transverse bars there. So the amalgamated trough cross-stratified poorly sorted sandstone, and overall in the geometry, if you see that they are lenticular in geometry, you call it is a channel deposit and it may be associated with a point bar. So if in a succession, I can make out these are the products of bar, these are the products of channel, and this is a lateral bar, this is a transverse bar, this is a point bar. So all these things and how they are associated in space, that is the concept of architectural element. Now, I'm just coming for 1 minute. Just think of this kind of situation, that this is my river valley, and at any particular time, the river is occupying the position in the river valley here. It may occupy a position here also at some time, or here also. Now it is positioned here, and there are different. Suppose this is the Bank-Cutter's lateral bar, these are the transverse bar, this may be longitudinal bar, this is, and these are the channels. These are the channels. And this is the river. This is the river, which is made up of bar, channel, and everything. And this is the river valley. Now, what will be the width? Suppose this is the width, W, and the total width of the river valley is capital W. So the capital W, it may be 200 to 2000 times of small w. That is the river valley width. And river can occupy any position within this river valley at any particular point of time. Okay. Now this river valley that subsides and allows the river to produce its product, which is preserved on tens to hundreds of meters of succession. Now, Niall's idea was there that any particular time when the river is there, how these different units, they are mutually, now I am showing it in a 2-dimension. Now, if you change it into 3-dimension, now and the channel goes like this, then there may be this is the Bank-Cutter, then there may be another bar here, there may be another bar here, this is channel. So can we reconstruct the entire geometry of the river at any particular point of time and how they are interrelated to one another? That concept is actually the concept of architectural element, which is the concept people practice now whenever they study in any fluvial deposit. Okay, so with this we end the fluvial discussion. Now we'll go on to, first we go on to the next topic of the continental sediment. Then we go on to, we first start with the lacustrine, lake deposition. Then we will discuss the desertic or aeolian. First we go to lacustrine. Any question on the fluvial, you can ask me or you can ask later also. Is architectural element is clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now lacustrine, the lake. Now if you think, presently we see large number of lakes. If you go to Rajasthan, there are several. If you go to Udaipur, if you go to any city, you go to Nainital, the Nainital lake, the Bhimtal lake, so many lakes. Pushkar, that is a lake. So why presently we see so many of lakes? Are there similarly so many of lakes in the ancient past, and we get the geological record of the lakes? No, we do not get. Now there are two possibilities. Number one, we cannot identify the deposits of the lake in the rock record because we don't have that much of knowledge. And secondly, the lakes were not formed so much in the ancient past. Now what is the possibility? What people think that yes, lakes are in large number because at present, just because that the continental mass is at a higher altitude now. Continental mass is at a higher altitude now, and that's why there is more number of lakes presently on the Earth's surface, which was not there in the ancient past, because the continents were not at that higher level of emergence. Am I clear what I am saying?
Yes, sir.
That the elevation difference between ocean and continent is highest on the surface of the earth now, which was not there earlier. And that is why there is more presence of the lakes at present. Now, lakes can be formed by different ways. Lakes can be formed by tectonic soil, lakes can be formed by glacier, lakes can be formed by the moraine jamming, lakes can be formed by the volcanism, which is volcanic lake. Lakes can be formed in a fluvial system such as a Oxbow Lake. So there are several reasons for which the lakes can be formed. Several reasons. But when a lake is formed, after that, what is the biggest lake on the surface of the earth today? The Caspian Sea. Caspian Sea, which is actually a lacustrine system, which has no opening to the open sea. So you can see a few tens to hundreds of square kilometer area to a area something like Caspian Sea, that is the dimension of a lake. Now, what is the difference between a open marine system and a lacustrine system? In an open marine system, you have the operation of wave and tide. But in a lacustrine system, you hardly get any operation of tide, because the lacustrine system, it cannot directly, like an open marine system, which becomes the moon, sun, earth system, and that operates in the ocean to form the tide, which is not possible in case of a lake. So a lacustrine system, it will not show any presence of tide, but you can have the effect of wave, because waves are formed by the shear of air flow on the surface of water. So if there is a air flow on the surface of on the water surface of a lake, you generate the wave. Wave can be generated, but because the lake size is small with respect to the ocean, so the fetch of the wave, that the area a wave covered, that is the fetch of the wave, it becomes much, much smaller. So the effect of that wave will not be felt beyond 10 to 20 meters of the lake depth, because the fetch of the wave is low. Am I clear? The fetch of the wave is low, and that's why, as you know, that the wave, how much depth a wave can act, that depends on the wavelength of the wave. And the depth penetration of a wave effect, that is more or less considered half of the wavelength in case of a Newtonian wave. Am I clear? Is whatever
Yes,
I am saying,
Yes,
is it getting clear?
Yes, sir.
Sir,
Okay.
Sir?
So, yes.
sir, why elevation is affecting the lakes, lake presence? Because आपने कहा ना सर कि एलिवेशन इंक्रीज हो गई है तो लेक्स ज्यादा मिलेंगे,
Uh-huh.
तो समझ नहीं आया.
If your elevation is high, so the chance of marine inundation is low. So when you have a low marine inundation, and then there is a more chance of the inland confinement of the water body, which is not connected with the marine system. If your system gets connected with the marine system, then you cannot have a confined water body in a continental system. And if you have a high elevation, so the chance of marine inundation is low, and in that case you can have a entirely continental confined system by any kind of the process. Suppose I have a tectonism, and the tectonism, it causes subsidence, and there is a subsidence and the subsided portion acting as a lake, which is not possible if your continent is of low elevation and there is a marine inundation, because there will be always a connection of that with the marine system.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Now, coming on to what we were discussing, that there, because of the lower fetch of the wave effect is mostly get confined in the top layer of the lake. It often may not reach up to the bottom of the lake. Now, lakes, if you see lakes of all the kinds of origin. Now, lakes can be in a tropical lake. You can have a lake in a desertic or arid climate, that is the arid lake, or you can have a lake which is in the cold climate. That is, so I can have a lake in a, So broadly, the lakes, they are divided into two types: open lake and closed lake. There are different classifications. I am starting with the first classification. What is an open lake? Open lake, actually, in a lake, what is the inflow? What is the inflow? What is the outflow? If we see the lake, there is an inflow and an outflow. What are the inflow? Inflow in lake in terms of precipitation. So inflow in a lake, it may be in the form of precipitation, or it will be in the form of any fluvial system which may be draining. So it is a fluvial discharge. Any fluvial system which may be draining into the lake. This is the inflow. What is outflow from a lake? Evaporation. Evaporation. That is the outflow of the lake. Okay. Now, if the inflow and outflow, they balance each other. If they balance each other, or inflow is marginally higher than the outflow, then you get that the lake margin or the lake coast, it is a static lake margin. Static lake margin. Lake is not shrinking with time, It is maintaining its margin, because inflow is balancing outflow, and inflow may be marginally higher than outflow. In that case, the lake margin will be static, and this kind of lake commonly we get in humid climate, and they are clastic in nature. So this kind of lake, open lake, we get in humid climate, and they are normally clastic in nature. And what is closed lake? When outflow, it is more than the inflow. When outflow is more than the inflow. And if outflow is more than the inflow, then what will happen? With time, the lake will be shrinking. And this kind of lake we get both in arid climate. The arid climate, it may be hot arid climate, it may be cold arid climate, both, but it should be arid. Hot or cold arid climate. And most of these, they are shrinking lake, and they will be chemical in nature. Most of these are chemical precipitation. Large, there is a significant number of evaporites that will be deposited. Okay. Now, this is one classification, that is open lake and closed lake. There is another classification.